This lesson is for anyone who has already studied Spanish in high school or college and would like a refresher on verb conjugation. So let's get started on our subject pronouns. Hopefully you remember that your sets of subject pronouns, which I've divided by singular and plural columns, we have first, second, and third person. Yo, which is first person singular. Nosotros, first person plural. You have second person, tú and vosotros, which are your familiar informal use, and then usted, ustedes, which are your formal use. Third person, él y ella, él being he, ella being she. Ellos y ellas are your plural forms of those two. For the yous, remember from our last lesson about how to address people in the you form. We have a distinction between familiar and formal. Your tú and vosotros are your familiar forms or informal, and then usted, ustedes are your formal. And remember that usted and ustedes is reserved for people that you have a more formal relationship with, that you speak with a more distinguished and respectful tone. It's very important when you are learning to communicate with others in a foreign language that you distinguish between the two. Before we move on, who remembers the 4 steps of conjugation? If you think about it, there's really 4 steps before you actually put a verb together. So if you were one of my former students, then you were drilled on how to do the 4 steps. So we have a first step, which is drop the ending of the infinitive. And we have 3 infinitives, AR, ER, and IR. What's our second step? You have to identify your subject, which we just went over. Yo, nosotros, tú, usted, ellos, y ellas. What's the next step? You have to choose the correct ending for that subject. And then our 4th step would be attach the appropriate ending to the stem, which is what you have left over after you drop off the AR, ER, and IR from the infinitive. Now let's review our endings for our 3 sets of verbs. We have o, as, a, amos, ais, an for our AR verbs, o, es, hemos, eis, en for ER verbs, and o, es, imos, is, en for IR verbs. And you will notice that the chart is color coordinated for each of the sets of endings that have the like vowels. So you'll notice that the ER verbs and the IR verbs share a few of the same endings. Here are some of our common AR, ER, and IR verbs: hablar, escuchar, mirar, comer, beber, comprender, escribir, subir, and vivir. So we're going to conjugate one of each of those verbs with our subject pronouns and our appropriate endings. See if you can do hablar. Pause the video here and try doing hablar by yourself before we move on. Okay, for the verb hablar, we took off the ending AR and we are left with the stem habl. And then when we add our endings o, as, a, amos, ais, an for the appropriate subjects, you have hablo, hablas, habla, hablamos, hablais, hablan. Now, a lot of times we leave off the subject pronouns in Spanish because our ending indicates the person that we're speaking about or to. The only problem we might run into will be with the third person singular and plural, habla and hablan, because they share that particular verb ending with other subjects, such as él, ella, usted. Those are 3 people. Ellos, ellas, ustedes were the 3 plurals. So that's the only one that we really have to be careful and make sure we use our subject pronoun with. Next, we're going to conjugate the verb comer. Pause the video here and see if you can conjugate the verb comer by yourself. For the verb comer, we have como, comes, come, comemos, coméis, comen. The verb means to eat, and for the yo form, yo como means I eat, tú comes, you eat or are eating, él, ella, usted come, he, she, or you formal eats, comemos, we eat, coméis, you all eat, comen, for ellos, ellas, ustedes, they eat or you formal eat. The next verb we're going to conjugate is the verb escribir. Pause the video here and see if you can conjugate it by yourself. Okay, here are 6 forms of the verb escribir, to write. Escribo, escribes, escribe, escribimos, escribís, escriben. This verb means to write, so yo escribo would be I write. Tú escribes, you write. How about nosotros escribimos? It means we write, or we are writing. If you want more practice, you can head over to Quizlet.com and find the class for Robin_Hill 17. And that way you'll be able to practice with talking flashcards, you practice your verb endings, matching up your subjects, doing tests, etc. They have lots of fun things over there for you to practice. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Adios.